Hey crafty friends, it's Joy here for Honeybee Stamps, and today I'm going to be showing how I watercolored the 3D embossed image from the Fall Forest 3D embossing folder. I have a piece of watercolor paper, and it kind of has the texture to it, not a smooth watercolor paper. And I'm running that through my die cut machine, and so you can see all of those beautiful trees. And I want to say, I have no idea how to watercolor, but I just felt like mixing the colors the way I'm going to do would be easy, and I could just share what I'm doing with you guys. I'm going to tape this down to my work surface because I don't, all the water is going to kind of make the paper bend, and so I want to try to avoid that. I have a really small watercolor pan from Altenew, and I do have some watercolor brushes. So I am starting with the yellow, and I'm going on just putting little spots onto all of the trees. I am trying to make sure that it is wet enough, but I didn't want it to be so diluted. I wanted the colors to be bright. My inspiration for this card is up our mountain that I live by. We live at the base of a mountain, and it takes us maybe about a half an hour to get to the top. But we just went for a drive this past weekend to go look at all of the leaves changing, and there was quite a few trees that had yellow, orange, and red on it. We don't get a ton of red where we're at. We do get a lot of yellow, a decent amount of orange, and a little bit of red. And I love to see the orange and the red. I feel like the orange almost glows in the dark, and it's just absolutely stunning. So that is my inspiration for this card. I just wanted to make beautiful watercolored images. I love 3D embossing folders, so to have these images also embossed off the background, I think is really a lot of fun. You could do this differently. You could do it where the colors are much lighter and it's just like a softer wash. You could do each tree in its own color. But this is what I decided to do. There's also a few trees in there that look like pine trees to me, and I will be adding green to those, not multiple colors, which is kind of nice because it does end up breaking up the background. There is also like some tree branches and things like that that don't have any leaves. So it looks like maybe all of those leaves have fallen off because it's fall. So I know right now this really looks like a hot mess, but please stay because I'm also going to show you how to make this stand out a little bit more as we go further into the video. Now I'm coming in with red. I'm just blending it with a little bit with that orange that I already have on the work surface, or excuse me, on my paper here. But right now it just kind of looks like blobs. I apologize that my head was in the way. I just needed to kind of lean in and see where my edges were for each of the trees. I'm trying to make sure to not cover up a lot of the stems, the trunks, the branches and things like that. A couple of the trees you do a little bit when you color them, but I was able to bring those back to life, and I will show you how I do that in just a little bit. I do like that it blends a little bit with the orange. Not everything was dry completely. I didn't want each layer to be soaking wet, so I know that this is a wet on dry way to go about it instead of wet on wet. I just think that probably would have made a huge mess on the background and not stayed on the tree. So I felt like this was a little bit more of a controlled way to add it, and I'm just using the tip of this kind of round brush that goes to a point. I have no idea what they're called, but if you are a watercolorist, you will know. But I like how this turned out. I also am going to come back in with a kind of a deep maroon red, and I'm just going to add little dots of that once I get this finished. So I'm going to do that here next. I'm going to blend that with the red, and then I'm just going to drop in little bits of color kind of on the red that I already put down. But you can see we're getting some shapes on the trees, but it still does look kind of messy, but I really love how this turned out. And my watercolor paper, I just bought this from a craft store and I thought I would try it out, is kind of a cream color. It's not white, which actually added nicely to this. So you have this kind of creamier background, not a stark white background. Then I'm using the green and just lightly brushing over the trees that look like pine trees to me. And up on our mountain, we do have a lot of pine trees too. So this was just the perfect background. But what another fun way to use a 3D embossing folder. It's so simple. And this was like super relaxing. This just didn't feel hard. It wasn't complicated. Okay, so I'm going to dry this as good as I can. And then we want to run this through with the embossing folder through the die cut machine one more time. So I'm going to make sure everything is lined up nicely because the water kind of softened some of the embossing and I want to bring that back. So I want to make sure it's nice and lined up. It's easier to see on those green trees. I'm looking on the front and then I'm looking on the back to make sure that everything is lined up and then praying that it doesn't move when I run it through my die cut machine again. But once we pull this out, it really pops. Like you can really see that 3D tree. I'm going to use a Distress watercolor pencil and I am using gathered twigs. I am not pressing hard because it will flatten that 3D embossed image, but I am going lightly, but I'm going over it multiple times so it'll be darker over all of the tree trunks and the stems in the tree. And I'm actually looking at my 3D embossing folder as my reference because on some of the colored parts, I can't see some of those areas. So I'm just kind of putting it in there. And I think it turned out super cute. I'm going to trim this down to an A2 size piece. I'm doing some splatter with Distress Oxide spray and black soot. And then I'm also going to use Fossilized Amber Distress Spritz. And on camera, it was kind of hard to see. I feel like you can see the spritz better on dark paper, but in person, you can see this beautiful gold background. I am stamping my sentiment from the Blessings of Fall, and it says, "To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven." Ecclesiastes 3:1. And I'm going to use the coordinating die to die cut that out, and then of course popping it up with foam adhesive. And I do have this adhered to a white A2 size card base, and I'm just going to center my sentiment because that whole background is really the focal point. Let's take a look at this up close and you can see all the beautiful trees, the tree shapes, the trunks, the branches. I just think it turned out so pretty, but you could do it however you want to. Thank you guys so very much for stopping by and watching. I hope that you enjoyed this project and I hope you guys have a really wonderful day. Bye.